Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. I'm Dan Stilgo, Marketing Manager at Blend, and joined by Phil Vallander, Co-founder at Blend, for the 50th episode of Demand Decoded, which is crazy. Crazy to say. I can't believe we're at 50 episodes of this podcast already. As somebody who loves and is extremely passionate about podcasting and marketing as well, being able to sit down here and, share our thoughts and insights from the industry and from experts as well is really, really amazing. So before we get into the episode, just wanted to say thank you to everybody that listens to this podcast. We might not be the biggest names in B2B marketing, despite some attempts maybe to get there, maybe one day. And we might not have the biggest following, but we do pride ourselves on bringing real proven insights that will help our listeners become better marketers and grow their business. And one last thing, if you do enjoy this podcast, please do give it a follow and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It will really help us get in front of more listeners and basically keep making this podcast bigger and better. Phil, anything to say on the 50th episode here?
50 episodes. Wow. I almost can't believe it. We've come a long way since our first nerve-wracking LinkedIn Live.
That was awful.
But I've loved every step of it. And while we've evolved nearly every, if not every aspect of this podcast in some way, I love that the purpose is still at its core the same, which is to communicate our real experience of B2B marketing in a more versatile way for our own uses and for our audience. And we've kept doing that and we've stuck to that. And that's what I love about it. The fact that people listen, people tell us they listen and tell us that they value what we share is mind-blowing. And to all of those, thank you. And meeting some of you at Inbound was incredible.
Was crazy, yeah.
So, that's another big reason we keep doing it. But yeah, it's come a long, long way. And yeah, thrilled to have reached this milestone.
Yeah, I do remember at Inbound having those, few people that did come up to us and say, "Oh, I listened to Demand Decoded, the podcast," and it's amazing. It is amazing. So yeah, we love doing it, and this year's going to be bigger and better. Way more episodes every single week. So really, just looking forward to smashing out more content and bringing everyone more insights.
Let's do it.
This podcast is brought to you by Blend. We're a B2B website and demand generation agency. We work with ambitious businesses just like yours to create and execute effective demand generation strategies that drive pipeline for your business. We also recognize that your website is the most important asset you have in marketing. So we specialize in building scalable websites on HubSpot that convert the demand that you've created. If you want to find out more about our services and see real results that we've generated for businesses, visit blendb2b.com. So, with all of that heartfelt fluff out of the way, we thought what better way to mark the 50th episode than to look back at everything we've shared on this podcast so far and to cover what really works in B2B demand generation. And I'll kick things off here because people might be expecting some tactics, some strategies to come out of this that I'm going to pinpoint and say, SEO works, LinkedIn works, this works, that works. But actually, what I really want to say here is that I think what I've learned over these past 50 episodes is that anything can work in demand generation, anything at all. There's no particular tactic that is dead or obsolete to a business. It just all depends on your business and your marketing organization's particular scenario. So many marketers don't think something works or don't know if something works because they lack fundamental insights like audience understanding, an in-depth knowledge of what their audience truly wants from them, and they don't know how to measure the effectiveness of things. So it's kind of like this never-ending loophole of trying out different tactics and different strategies, not really knowing what works in their business, and just trying things and hoping for the best because they lack those fundamental insights.
Yeah.
So anything can work.
Yeah. Well, like what works for you, for your business is a product of who you're selling to and what you're selling to them. And that should be a major guiding light for you, right? Because too many marketers do things, conduct their activity like detached from what their buyer really does,
Yeah.
wants, reacts to. All of the data they have at their disposal often tells them nothing about the way their buyers really buy and what they prefer. And in some cases tells them the exact opposite of what's happening and what works. And so marketers need to, before anything else, before choosing tactics, before choosing strategies, need to kind of get out of the weeds, get out of the fog that exists around marketing measurement and around marketing strategy, and kind of elevate their thinking to what is it our buyer wants and responds to. And that's probably already revealed if you look in the right places, if you look at the right data, and if you measure in the right way. It's not a secret, it's not a mystery, but until you get to grips with it, you can't really tell what will work, what won't work, what you should optimize, what you should stop, what you can, within your marketing, within your go-to-market approach.
Yeah. The thing is, in terms of what works in demand generation, your audience will be able to tell you what works. Okay, not explicitly, oh, if you market to me like this, then I will buy from you. They're obviously not going to come out and say something like that, but they hold the insight. They hold all of the keys to what you should be doing in marketing. The problem is, marketing are often so detached from the customer that they never get to reveal those insights themselves, and they never actually truly understand their audience and their customers. Like, you've got sales and customer success teams which are talking to potential buyers and customers every single day, in-depth calls, but a lot of these insights are just never given to marketing, or they're given to marketing in a distilled down different version that might suit an agenda, of those particular functions, and it's not truly what the buyer is saying. So there are lots of ways that marketers can gather these insights, whether it's, just talking to those teams and getting it from them, or getting call recordings like from sales teams and customer success teams, etc. Or, you go a step further and do some sort of market research using Winter or GWI to get a larger sample size of data with specific questions and insights. But the fundamental thing here is just understand your audience, understand what truly matters for them, and the channels that they use to research, the things that they care about when they buy. Use all of those insights to fuel the strategies and tactics and things you're going to try, basically, like to fuel your strategy.
Yeah, I think if you identify and understand the behaviors of your buyers and the way that they really want to buy and do buy today, then it can address a lot of challenges that marketers face, because it's the ultimate truth around which to optimize. But nevertheless, I think another factor that's worth considering for marketers that are trying to make their marketing work better for their business is the stage, size, and maturity of their company versus the go-to-market playbook that they're trying to implement, and the cost of the machine that it requires to make certain strategies work. You've correctly said anything can work. By anything, we mean any logical marketing strategy. Outbound sales can work, intent data can work, etc., etc., etc. But the cost of the machine and the time it takes to make some of those systems work, is wholly incompatible, I think, with a lot of SMEs' situation today, and with the external environment they find themselves in. When businesses that are successful and thriving on those models first implemented them, they were very different businesses in a very different economy, and if they were to design a business today to achieve the results they need to achieve, they probably wouldn't put really inefficient, high activity, low ROI strategies like mass cold calling, huge amounts of emailing, etc., at the heart of it, right? Because the money that it takes to see that through for long enough to drive a return on investment is massive. So I think an important sort of challenge to pose themselves for marketers is, what's the right set of strategies for my business, not emulating the models of bigger businesses that couldn't and wouldn't implement those strategies today if they were in your position.
Yeah. My favorite example here is probably HubSpot. Like, we love HubSpot as a business. We're a HubSpot partner. Like, its product is absolutely incredible,
Yep.
and its marketing, like, is brilliant as well. But when HubSpot first, really started to go to market in like the early 2010s, their approach was primarily, inbound marketing with a lot of lead generation in there and outbound as well. And whilst at that particular time, this was effective because these kind of tactics were less saturated
Yep.
and buyers were more receptive to downloading content and expecting follow-ups after that. Now everybody has tried to replicate that approach over 10 years since it was popularized. It's so saturated now that buyers are so tuned out to any kind of lead generation or unsophisticated outbound approach that it's just totally ineffective. So if you were to try and copy HubSpot's really amazing model back then, but for now, you'd have a hard time really proving any ROI from it.
Yeah, you can't implement that model today and succeed without making modification to it, without changing it to reflect the buyer
Yeah.
behavior in the external environment that we currently operate in, and the reality of your business in terms of its cash position, its need for pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. So like a lot of other playbooks, that one had its time, had its place, but isn't a fit for today in the, well, period, I think.
Yeah, I think like businesses that implemented it back then, early 2010s, have just seen a lot of benefit from doing so over that period of time. Like, it's had a compounding impact on like their SEO and brand and things like that. But just implementing that today, because buyer preferences, behavior, all of that have changed, it won't have the same effect that it did.
They will have seen the ratio of activity to result decrease. A similar parallel can be seen on most social media platforms in terms of like what's the ad spend required to generate a result of some sort. It's decreasing, as in the efficiency is decreasing, because more and more people are adopting, saturating and mastering those channels. So when businesses have successful outbound prospecting engines, the number of activities they have to do to generate a result, be it a meeting booked or a pipeline, opportunity created, will have increased.
Mm-hmm.
The ratio will have increased, and the efficiency will have got worse. But they've baked in success off the back of that model. They've baked in, the ability to fund it, scale it, deliver against it. But it won't be the thing that they put in place if they were starting over, because the efficiency is too low and the time to results is too long. So for marketers who want to see success today, it isn't about picking tactics based on advice that you're receiving or hearing out in the world. It's about understanding your buyer and aligning your tactics to their preferred experience.
Ask the right questions or get the right insights about your audience. Like, what is their buying process? Who's in their buying committee? What channels and resources do they use them when they're researching topics like yours? All of these things, understand, the formats that they like to consume content in. This can all be done through market research, and the other insights about buying and challenges and benefits that they care about can all be done through product sales and customer success insights. It's all there most of the time at marketers' fingertips. They just don't use it, and like you say, often emulate somebody else because it's easier.
And to take that further, what will buyers do on your website versus what won't they do? What content will they consume versus ignore? What will lead to them expressing their interest through your website versus just leaving to do something else? This insight is available to us, and if we optimize around it, then we have the opportunity to create quite sizable impact for our organization. But it requires that you look at the right data, not just more data, and it requires that you couch third-party advice with your own insight, first and foremost, to avoid implementing something that may well have worked for another business at another time, but just isn't going to help you achieve your goals now. Measurement is a fundamental issue, and it's both a challenge and the solution depending on how you attack it, right?
Yeah, measurement is the next point to come on to. But just to wrap up, the audience side of things, once you have the audience insight available to you, that's going to tell you what to try, what channels to go and explore and be in, and what content types to try out, and what to put on your website, what user experience should be there, etc., etc. Once you actually have these things in place, the other thing that's going to tell you what actually works in B2B demand generation for your business is measurement.
Yeah.
And measurement is the biggest problem in B2B demand generation, without a doubt. I don't think we've done an episode on this podcast without talking about measurement.
Yep.
There's either too much measurement or not enough measurement, or marketers just don't know how to use this measurement. Data and measuring the right things is literally just the biggest fundamental problem in marketing.
Yeah. Well, we see it all, taking action without measuring the current situation, the intended consequence, the expected outcome, is common, which means you're sort of moving around the pieces, but you've got no plan for where they'll end up or what impact that change will have. There's often a tendency in marketers to look at a problem, assume or be convinced by others that the solution is loads more data about the problem, loads more metrics, loads more measurement, and then that becomes the focus to put in place additional measurement. All that measurement is then collated, and it's incomprehensible, it's incomparable, and it doesn't actually tell you in any way how to improve your demand generation marketing results. And the problem is no better. It's really frustrating to see it happen.
Yeah, and there's just different kinds of measurement. Like when it comes to marketing, we have so much data available to us now. It is ridiculous. So knowing how to segment and use different data is a unique kind of tool in itself to be able to use. So you've got your platform and channel metrics, which don't necessarily tell you how effective that thing is at driving real business commercial outcomes. Your click-through rates and cost per clicks and CPMs and all of this stuff aren't actually telling you if the right buyers are coming to your website and, inquiring or requesting a demo or whatnot and converting into pipeline and revenue.
Yeah.
And if they're the right people as well.
The data that you use to optimize and improve a channel, for example, should not be the same data that you use to justify or measure the impact of your strategy. And I think you mentioned on our previous conversation that, too often the same set of measures are used for everything.
Yeah.
They're used to justify the budget, they're used to prove the performance, and they're used to optimize the application of the channel. And in reality, all of those things are very different and need to be looked at differently to avoid the problem of perverse incentives, to avoid the issue where, anything that's measured ceases to be a good, metric or whatever the saying is. That's not it, by the way. But the point being that too often we measure something to the point where it fails to be useful to us, and we start using it in, as an incentive, for example. So, quite often, because marketers are obsessing over the in-platform metrics or the sort of vanity metrics that we've spoken about in previous episodes, they fail to step back and look at a bigger picture about the holistic buyer journey that they go on from, first discovery through to purchasing something, and to optimize for that and spend all their energy optimizing around these, useful but ultimately not the North Star, not the prize metrics. And that, I think, has two consequences. One is, well, a lot of misguided spend in the first place, potentially, but also this pattern that I see talked about more and more now, which is where marketers are not trusted by their organization in the same way that they should be, because CEOs can't see and don't believe the revenue impact they're having, because what they're being reported is click rates, impressions, likes, follows, and a scattered array of disconnected metrics, which are very important and useful in marketing, but not the reason to do marketing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I have slammed on vanity metrics before, but now when I think about it, like metrics they're vanity metrics when they're used the wrong way.
Yes.
Like a metric on its own being looked at isn't a vanity metric. What makes it vanity is when you serve it in the wrong context.
Yeah, and call it success.
Exactly. If I take LinkedIn for example, in LinkedIn ads, you've got things like click-through rates and average view time, or view completion rate on videos and dwell time on ads, and all of these things are really interesting insights to design new ad creative and change up your campaigns for better results. But those metrics are not to be used in front of a board or management or whatever it may be. They're like marketing insights.
Yeah.
They're not commercial objectives and aren't going to tell you if that channel was truly having a business impact or not.
Or in the website area, for example, bounce rate.
There you go.
I reduced bounce rate by 20%. So what?
Yeah.
I would happily have a bounce rate of 98% if I had more than enough pipeline generated as a result of it. Your reducing of bounce rate, may be positive, may be the right thing to do, may be a success, but it is not a business KPI that ultimately matters or should be influenced by marketing as a whole.
Yeah.
And so, it's really important to reflect on what measurements you're using, where and when and why, so that you're ultimately producing a bigger business impact, as opposed to an array of less valuable impacts that ultimately one day will be your undoing in terms of, can I have more budget, your seat at the table, and the trust that you have in the C-suite ultimately.
Yeah. I think to give some advice here, I suppose, when it comes to measurement, because we kind of suggested how you might be able to gather some audience insights. Once you start running those particular campaigns or strategy, I suppose strategy we're talking about here, once you implement those audience insights into your strategy and have these things running, we've kind of told you what you shouldn't be looking at and what you should be looking at in terms of measurement. But I think just to clear that up, the main things that I would look for when it comes to measuring what's truly working for us or another business that we're working with is you've got some in-platform insights from conversion tracking in terms of ads and stuff like that. So how many people are seeing or viewing your ads and going through onto your website and completing a high intent form? Really important signal to understand how many buyers are actually coming to your website and converting on there. Then, of course, you've got self-reported attribution. Buyers coming onto your website, inquiring or booking a demo or signing up for a free trial and telling you exactly how they heard about you. So if the things that you start doing, like LinkedIn, like a podcast, whatever it may be, and buyers aren't telling you that they heard about you through those sources, it may be that they're not having the influence that you thought they might be.
Right. It's really crucial to measurement is very, very valuable. And yet, ironically, it doesn't change anything. You don't need these measurements necessarily to do the right marketing, because they simply tell you what is true already when you use things like self-reported attribution, when you measure the buyer's journey, the real buyer's journey. But measurement of these things is so useful to identify the correct strategies to optimize around and to turn away and to turn down the noise around things that are conventionally very talked up but may not work in your situation or for your business. Because ultimately there's a lot of people out there who profit and benefit when you apply their thinking, regardless of whether you succeed or not. And so the way you measure and what you measure is crucial for determining what will produce your success, when you apply it, as opposed to the success of others at your expense.
So those first two ones were specific to marketing. And then you've got the bigger picture measurement in terms of like pipeline sources. So within this, you will probably have like website or event and those things that are actually contributing to pipeline. Within that, you should also have the sales sources as well. So outbound or partner, whatever it may be.
For sure.
And then at a larger and more holistic level, you can see what are our broad stroke and best sources of pipeline. What convert into closed won revenue at the highest rate? It's probably going to be your website in most cases.
Yeah.
Then ROI. How many marketers actually report on ROI?
Yeah,
Even
or cost per customer.
even broad stroke, right? Yeah, cost. Yeah, like how many marketers are truly saying this is how much we spent overall on marketing, and this is the return on closed won revenue?
Yeah.
Not many people are looking at that.
No, and even those that do, potentially only reporting part of their cost.
Yeah.
Ad spend, for example, or discretionary marketing spend, not overlooking headcount, resource, agency, etc., etc. It's important to look at the real cost, and all of this can lead to some quite shocking revelations. And nothing we say can make that any easier. But ultimately, it's so important that marketers go through this process of realization. For a lot of businesses, the bulk of their marketing investment is having little to no direct impact on pipeline.
Yeah,
that's the sad truth. But you can only begin to change that when you recognize and acknowledge that problem and you start to identify the solutions. Something else that marketers need to do once they've aligned measurement more closely to the real business impact they want to drive, in addition to marketing metrics that help them optimize their channels and tactics, is trust their own data. So often I see marketers trusting the opinions of third parties, who again, have succeeded in different times, in different ways, with different businesses, or profit when you use their approach as opposed to that any other approach. The way your buyers buy today is probably revealed in your data, if you look at the right data, and it's not going to change overnight, no matter what you apply. And so you need to trust what your data is telling you about your buyers and optimize around it, as opposed to trust that what someone else is telling you should be true, even if your data tells you the exact opposite. And I see that night and day difference. I saw it in our own data, first and foremost, 2017, 2016, I don't know when, and we see it over and over again. The performance of marketing channels, of buyers, of pipeline tells us this. The voices online tell us this. And there is a real battle going on in the minds and hearts of marketers as to who to trust.
Yeah.
But trust yourselves and trust your information first, and use it to cross-reference third-party information, data, and recommendations. Don't do it the other way around.
Yeah. And this leads to another issue where marketers are looking at some data which is telling them, we're not generating any pipeline from this channel. Revenue is really poor. ROI is absolutely abysmal. This channel, this strategy, tactic, whatever it may be, is not working for us, despite pumping a load of money into it.
Yeah.
And yet influencers outside of this, vendors, analysts, personalities on LinkedIn, whatever it may be, are saying this thing is really working for them. So it leads to marketers never turning stuff off.
Yeah.
Marketers will kind of run Google ads and LinkedIn ads and, content syndication and all of these things forever. They just keep on going with it because somebody's telling them it's working for their business in their situation, yet their own data is telling them that this thing is not working. But I also think there is probably a bit of pressure on us as marketers to get things right.
Yeah.
To always be right. We've got so much data at our fingertips. We've got so many different successful people and businesses telling us what to do. How could you possibly get that wrong? How could you spend that money and get nothing back from it? But it happens. You have to try things and go, as long as you're doing things for the right reason, because you're going off of audience insight and what your buyers are telling you, then ultimately you have to test these things and see what the result is.
Yeah. Be prepared to test and fail. Marketers are encouraged to test and fail, and yet I think always expected to be right all the time, because to spend money on a channel, on an experiment, and then to turn it off is so often perceived as unacceptable failure, but it is necessary. But it's also, I think you can't go wrong putting more money where it's already working and using that as a foundation upon which to test.
Yeah.
When everything you do is a test and you hope that it will work, you're in a really bad spot as a marketer. And you've probably trusted the voices of, social media and of vendors too much, because you're giving them a lot of money and not getting anything back for yourself.
Yeah.
But if you look at what's really happening, as I said, the way your buyers buy today is the way they will buy tomorrow, most likely. And you put more of your budget behind what produces those outcomes, then you're in a much, much better place. You can't go wrong generating more of what's already working, but you can put yourself in a position to truly test and be able to turn off experiments when they have run their course and when you do know that they're not going to deliver their result for you. It brings us maybe onto another interesting point about the fact that not everything is measurable in a direct way or a easy way, and quite often, there are channels that the data doesn't tell you easily that it's an effective, powerful channel, but maybe even buyers are telling you it's important to them. Maybe voices who have your best interests at heart are telling you it's an important channel, but it isn't measurable in your current approach. What about the situation that I think many find themselves in, where they do believe that there are channels that are important, that are opportunities for them, that they need to experiment in and or master, but the data that's available in the marketing automation platform, the CRM, the pipeline, doesn't give you any hint that that's an important channel. What are your thoughts and tips for marketers that are in that position?
Yeah, well, if you're running strategies or, putting budget and resources into particular channels, as long as you've done that for the right reasons through buyer research and what your audience has truly told you, then you probably are onto the right thing. On that point, though, I do think occasionally marketers can take insight from one or two customers and what they've said and go headfirst into that.
Yeah.
Where, the main cohort of buyers believe and use and think something entirely different.
Right.
So firstly, when it comes to establishing what channels you're going to use, what strategies you're going to deploy, take a holistic approach to what your audience is actually telling you.
Yeah.
Use a wide range of data and signals to tell you what the right things are to use. Don't just go off of what one customer has told you, because they don't reflect your entire audience and your ICP. But if you've done all that and you're running strategies based on real audience insight, then usually it's a problem with the strategy when it comes down to how you're executing on that particular channel or doing that particular tactic. And I think when it comes to that point of view, if you're in your CRM and looking at, pipeline and closed won data, and you're not seeing anything associated with these channels or these efforts, then it's a case of working your way back through the measurements to get to the more tactical things to say, okay, from a vanity metric approach or a more specific channel metric insight, why isn't this thing working? Like, is the click-through rate really poor, for example? Are our cost per clicks through the roof? Is the audience we're targeting totally wrong? And, usually within that, as long as the channel is right for you and your business, then it's probably a strategy problem with that particular channel.
Yeah. The most effective marketing today isn't necessarily measurable in the conventional ways, right? Otherwise, we've come to sort of rely upon performance-based ways. So to some degree, marketing is and always has been intuition, that you need to use audience insights, self-reported attribution, which can be a useful way to gather some incremental confirmation that the channels you're optimizing for that don't produce trackable, measurable interactions are powerful and relevant in the buyer's journey. Audience insights, your intuition, self-reported attribution in your pipeline performance. Saying that might sound completely at odds with this idea that marketing needs to be more revenue focused and business KPI focused, but I don't think that's the case. I think actually they mutually support one another. It's when you get obsessed with the misguiding data in the middle that you lose your power.
Yeah.
If you talk to your business and you optimize your marketing in terms of revenue, it affords you the opportunity to be much more intuitive with where you put your content, where you put your time and your money based on your buyer insights, because you're less beholden to the measurements and KPIs and metrics that are in between those two phases.
Ultimately, marketers are responsible for a budget. And there's this thing around brand, right? And I've seen it on LinkedIn loads, which is, can you really measure brand? Brand has come out of the woodwork as this, incredibly important thing to establish with your customers, build that connection, that affinity with them. And I don't think it's wrong at all. It's totally right, but it's given more weight now than it ever has been. Like, there is so much emphasis on, being the brand that your ICP wants to use. And so often people say, it's not possible to measure these things because it's brand awareness and we're just making sure people, know who we are. But I'm not sure I jive with that, to be honest. If you're investing in something in marketing and you can't prove a return on that, that's not good enough.
I think this comes back to the stage of company discussion again, and certain things make sense at different sizes and are only really possible and permissible at different sizes. So when you're an SME trying to achieve scale, you don't have any room for brand marketing that isn't connected to pipeline, I don't think. The good news for those marketers is that, in my view, demand generation marketing is brand activated. So the brand discussion is usually countered with, well, what marketing is brand and what marketing is activation? And when people hear brand, they instantly think about ambitious, sort of disconnected, bold brand activity, the likes of which can't be measured and can't produce a direct pipeline impact ever. But the likelihood is that's not what people are talking about. A lot of the time when people say brand, they simply mean marketing that doesn't have conversion-based optimization built into it.
Good
and
point.
Demand generation, anytime you put your opinion, your point of view, your message out there in a way that isn't asking for anything back from your buyer until they're ready, that's brand for me. That is getting your brand into the minds of and in front of your ideal customer without asking for anything back.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about demand generation, and particularly inbound demand generation, is that it connects the dots between that step in the process and every other step in the process into your pipeline. Hence why I say demand generation is brand activated. It's brand marketing done with a purpose, but it isn't measured in the way that performance-based marketing is, and therefore it doesn't have the same counter positive impacts on the buyer mindset and psychology. So it is brand marketing. Now, when you're 100 million ARR and you've got marketing budget, falling out of your pockets, then you might look at brand in a different way. And you might say, in order to reduce our cost per customer, we want to do something that gets our brand into the minds of, everybody in our market, the 95% of people that are not buying, and every single one of them. And you might do something crazy. You might do billboards like MailChimp did. You might wrap trams like HubSpot did in Australia. You might do crazy stuff, but you've got no place doing that if you're an SME trying to build pipeline. But you also don't need to do that, right?
Yeah, you don't. But I think that was probably a good point to end on for this particular section.
Yeah.
Because we've covered... So I just want to loop back really to the start, which is we're covering the topic, what really works in B2B demand generation. And, we've kind of said when it comes to what works, your audience and your buyers and your customers will tell you what things to try and what should inform your strategy. And the measurement that you have in place will tell you if these things are working to drive real business outcomes.
Yeah.
So, their audience and measurement are the two things really that you should take into consideration when you think about what really works for B2B demand generation in your business.
Yeah, and trust those things and don't do the exact opposite, expecting a great result.
Yeah. The last thing I want to touch on though, Phil, is the kind of evolution that we're now in B2B marketing and how marketers really need to be alive to these changes in the industry. I'm mainly thinking about AI here, which we haven't really touched on much on this podcast. The next episode is on AI, but yeah, just how AI is evolving the landscape and things like personality led growth and being more human led in marketing and whatnot. And I mean, like, marketers just really need to be able to adapt to this next phase of marketing, especially with the introduction of AI, and use it to their advantage.
Yeah. Ultimately, what we're trying to do as marketers and what works remains the same. It always was the same. It always is the same. It always will be the same. We're here to make selling easier, and we best do that by facilitating the experience and journey that buyers demonstrate they want to have based on their behavior. So that remains the same. How you do that is constantly evolving, and to a large extent it's driven by how successful marketers have been at adopting new technologies and saturating new channels. And we are definitely going through a period of change now. Many changes, I think driven largely by adoption and saturation of social media channels is the fundamental change that's taking place. I think the rise of the sort of creator influencer in B2B and elsewhere is a product of, increased noise relative to signal in the platforms that B2B buyers currently still like to spend time on. The authenticity that comes with those formats, those approaches, is really valued by buyers currently. And the other change we're going through is the rise of AI, which is potentially going to have unimaginable size impacts on the way that buyers buy, depending on the effect that they have on the platforms where they're most used, I think. So you've got to be alive to changes. There's a lot of very interesting changes going on at the moment, and that always has been the job of marketing. I think what I now realize, as I say it, is that we've reached a point in time where there is so much information and so much of it is misinformation that a lot of marketers are behind the change that's already happened. Lead generation, the activity to result ratios in social, in ads, in calls, etc. Like, these changes have already happened, and a lot of marketers are behind because they're being told to stay behind by people that profit when they do. And now there are new changes coming in. Their impact is yet to be seen.
I think I was listening to Dave Gerhardt's podcast, and he likened this rise of AI to the introduction of the internet. And I really agree with his point, which is that the marketers and businesses that didn't lean into the internet were left behind. And I truly think the marketers and businesses that don't lean into AI and its capabilities of making everything more efficient, and they don't become the strategist and user of AI, like, they will be left behind. And marketers that don't try and figure out the best ways to use AI in their business and their process and their content creation, all of these things will be replaced by it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy to sort of deny the importance of AI and to resist adopting it, because that will ultimately lead to your obsolescence, I think, to some degree. What's interesting about AI is that it can be used for incredibly good effect, and is by many, but it can just as easily be used, well, even easier perhaps, be used to incredibly poor effect. A connection of mine on LinkedIn, Clemens Lepers, said something I thought was very insightful, which is, whether you used AI to create a piece of content or a piece of creative is not the important element. It's the intent behind it and the end product, right? We've already proven that we can create great quality content using AI as a part of the process. Content that is equal to, if not better than, content we could create before. It has not changed our approach, our philosophy, our mindset, or the quality standards we hold ourselves to. But there are lots of people out there. We're seeing huge amounts of spam around tools that help you create spam, on the rise. The thing that interests me is the effect that has on the platforms we currently use to reach buyers, as it potentially erodes their patience for those platforms. So I think where we do marketing will change, where we reach buyers will change, because AI will disrupt the platforms that we currently use. Just like search has already been disrupted, its role in the purchase path, in the buyer journey, has changed. social, the current social media landscape and its role in the buyer's journey, I think will have to change, because too many people will use AI to poor levels and it will create too much noise around the signal. But we can still use AI to great effect wherever it becomes sensible to do so. And again, buyer insights will tell you where that is. Proper measurement will tell you how effective it's being, and you can win doing that.
Yeah, I think B2B marketing is changing and will change rapidly, like faster than ever. The channels that we use right now to reach our audience will change. The effectiveness of those will change. How you use AI in your processes, in your content creation, will have an impact on this. But fundamentally, if you have that deep understanding of your audience and your ICP and what matters to them and how they're gathering information and how they want to buy, if you just use those insights to inform your strategy, then you'll adapt and you'll be able to do the right things.
You should never be in any doubt about what the right things to do are. I think what a lot of marketers wish is that advice from third parties could make marketing easy, like make generating new customers easy. I don't think it ever will or can. It's just too much of a complicated system that we operate in. But marketing can be simple, as in knowing what your buyers want, what they trust, where they go, who they talk to, can make choosing how you market to them very simple.
Yeah.
Although it might not make it easy.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up there. I suppose, sorry to the audience that thought that was going to be an episode where we were going to say exactly, which channels, tactics, and strategies to use, because, we can't do that fundamentally. Although we do spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about, channels and more tactical things that work broadly in B2B marketing. When you're thinking about what really works, the main thing is to look at your own insights. So, cool. Let's wrap things up there. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded. Again, I just can't believe we're at 50 episodes. If you have enjoyed it so far, please follow us and leave us a review. Would help massively. And thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Bye, everyone.
Take care.